Top shelf classic lager, brewed using only the finest noble hops and Canadian malt. This crisp and refreshing lager aims high and scores big. From Lake Bay's Brewing Company in partnership with the NHL Alumni Association. Available at the LCBO and the beer store.
You're listening to Life After the Game, brought to you by Gong Show Gear, the show that profiles former NHL players on their playing days and current lives after hockey. Here's your host, Darcy Lynch.
My guest today is Wayne Primeau. Played over 750 NHL games over 14 seasons with the Sabres, Lightning, Penguins, Bruins, Sharks, Flames, and Leafs. Welcome to the show, Wayne.
Thanks, Darcy.
And Wayne, in a moment, I want to talk about what you're up to these days, still very involved with the game of hockey. But to start with, just doing a bit of a walk through your NHL career and starting with your time in the OHL. You spent a little bit of time with the Oshawa Generals, of course, now the Memorial Cup champion Oshawa Generals, but the majority of your time was in Owen Sound. And a lot of former platers have been on the show recently, and it's such a small community in Owen Sound for OHL hockey, and not necessarily the most attractive spot whenever players are first going there. But guys like Kirk Mulkey and Jamie Storr who've been on just talk about the great memories, and once you're there and you're insulated into that market, that it's such a phenomenal place to play junior hockey. What were your experiences like in Owen Sound?
Well, it was great. I remember, obviously Keith was playing junior before me, and I remember going up and watching him with the Thunder playing against Owen Sound in Owen Sound, and I appreciated the crowds that they had there and the atmosphere, and I think that it did get a little bit of a bad rap, but at the same time, for me, it was all about playing the game of hockey, and I was very fortunate when I was drafted to Owen Sound that I lived with a great family, the Byers family, who I still stay in touch with. Their son was in my wedding party, and so I have a lot of fond memories there, and I appreciate everything they did to help me get to the next level, which was the NHL.
And when you broke into the NHL, it was with the Sabres. And Ted Nolan had a tough, difficult job this year in Buffalo, working with a last-place team, but trying to develop young talent at the same time. You playing under Ted as a rookie, how did you find him as your first coach? And from a development standpoint, was he a good fit for you when you were breaking into the NHL?
Yeah, I mean, I only had him. I think that year I played maybe 40 games under him, but I liked what Ted brought to the table. He wasn't as much of an X's and O guy as he was a rah get in your face kind of get the guys going type coach. Obviously, that's a number of years ago, so that might have changed. But I thought he did a great job with us in Buffalo with the young group that we had, and I was a little bit surprised that the Sabres let him go this year, as they were going in a rebuilding era, and so to see him get let go, I'm sure he was disappointed, and I'm a little bit shocked. But at the same time, I think they just want to make changes, and not just to their players, but also to the staff as well.
And Wayne, when I was recently in downtown Toronto, not far from where you currently reside, I had the pleasure of spending an afternoon at the Hockey Hall of Fame. And it had been a few years since I had been there, but I was overwhelmed with the number of new exhibits and interactive displays that have been added, that it was just a great way to spend the afternoon. And I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't been to the Hockey Hall of Fame or hasn't been there recently, that they're constantly adding new things. And speaking of new, I spent a lot of the time that I was there on the newest inductees, the players that went in last year, and one of those being Dominik Hasek, who you played several seasons with early in your career. And just reading about him at the Hockey Hall of Fame reminded me of just what an unorthodox, but at the same time, unbelievable goaltender that he was during his playing career. And several of his former teammates and yours from the Sabres days have been on this show and talked about how he was just such an enigma, both on the ice and off. Not necessarily the guy that all these teammates were the closest with, but a guy that the consistent theme is they respected so much and that they could never take away from his work ethic. What was your personal experience like playing with Hasek?
I agree 100%. I mean, he wasn't one of the guys that I think that I would hang out with or so on. But I was actually just recently at his Hockey Hall of Fame party when he was in town for his induction. But people ask me, to this day. I mean, I've obviously played for 6 teams and played with a lot of good goaltenders. But Dom Hasek, in my mind, was probably the best, one of the best, if not the best goalie to play. He was one of those goalies that hated to be scored on. Was very competitive. I remember in practice, and I tell this story a lot, where we had the guys kind of in a horseshoe, and he wanted the guys to shoot high on him, and so everybody's shooting high, but hitting them more in the chest area, shoulder, and he kind of stops us all, and he's like, no, shoot high at my head. So guys started hitting like rifling clappers off of his helmet, and whereas most goalies, I mean, when you come down and you take a shot and it's high or it hits them in the head, they're not too happy. With him, he didn't care. He just wanted to stop the puck, no matter how he did it, whether it was with his head or not. So that you have to appreciate a lot. And I also remember pregame skates. If he let a goal in during pregame skate, he wouldn't allow you to leave the ice until he stopped you. So he, like I said, he was not just a great goalie, but a great competitor, and it was a big part of our success when we were in Buffalo.
This is Life After the Game, brought to you by Gong Show Gear. This week's guest is former NHLer Wayne Primeau. And you talk about the success in Buffalo and the very memorable run in 1999, going to the Cup final. And a difficult game, I know, to share memories of for a lot of players, because it was such a devastating loss, the circumstances especially. Darryl Sador was recently on the show, and he was talking about that being the first Stanley Cup win of his 2 wins, and he talked about how quiet it was in the Dallas dressing room in those overtime periods. That he said, you're that far into the playoffs, there's really not much left for a coach to say. He said even Ken Hitchcock was very reserved and quiet. Take us through what that was like. I know the aftermath of that game-winning goal by Brett Hull was very tough to digest, but even just a game going that long, going into several overtimes whenever the Stanley Cup is in the building, what was that like in the Sabres dressing room?
Yeah, I mean, it was it's a fun 2.5 months when you get that far. It's really memorable. You just remember like the optional skates more because you're playing more and playing hard minutes, and it's every kid's dream is to ultimately get there. It's the two teams that are left standing, and I still remember during that game, obviously triple overtime, I lost my edge a couple of times, so I had to get my skates sharpened, and I was in the corridor, and the media is kind of waiting there, just waiting for, in my mind, waiting for Dallas to score so they can, get on the ice and everything else. And unfortunately, any other year that goal would have been a great goal, but at that time, that year, there were so many goals that were being called back with their foot in the crease, let alone even just their big toe. So as soon as the goal went in, the floodgates were open, and media was on the ice, and I don't think that the NHL really could have done anything to change it. So unfortunately, we were kind of the guinea pigs in that situation. But it was still a joyful ride getting there with my teammates, and a lot of memories, even though we didn't win. And unfortunately, that was the only time I ever got to the Stanley Cup Finals. I made it to the conference finals 2 or 3 more times after that. But it really is. I mean, at that time, I think I was 23 when I got to the finals, and you're still young. You feel like there's going to be many more years to get there, and when it's over, said and done with, it didn't happen again. So, but yeah, it was. It's definitely draining. It just hits you as soon as it's over. Like I said, you're just playing so hard for so many months, and then all of a sudden it just comes to an abrupt end, and it's emotionally and physically draining.
After Buffalo, you were traded to Tampa, and then you ended up being traded several times throughout your career. But the trade that stands out, that's most memorable, that I'm sure you're asked about the most, is whenever you went to the Boston Bruins as part of the deal for Joe Thornton. And not only about the fact it's obviously got to be a bit of a shocker each time you're getting traded, even if you've been traded before, it still is a shock. But were you as surprised as everyone else in the NHL community that just whether or not he was being traded for you, just the fact that Joe Thornton was being traded out of Boston, was that in and of itself very shocking for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was actually very shocking because when it happened, we were in Dallas at the time, and we had just taken warm up, and I usually do a routine, before the game and stuff, and so as I'm getting kind of ready to start the game, it was probably 10, 12 minutes before we're going on the ice, and they called me into the coach's office, and we were going through a little bit of a slump there, and they called Marco Sturm and Brad Stewart as well. So I'm thinking, we're a little bit of the older guys, I guess, and maybe the coaches were going to tell us, we need to get out of this funk type thing, and we need you guys to kind of lead and stuff. And next thing you know, when I'm in there, in the coach's room, Doug Wilson walks in, and as soon as that happened, I knew that something was happening. And and he told me or told us, I mean, it still didn't make it any easier who we were traded for or whatever. So it was that was probably one of the toughest ones that I had been a part of, because I had just signed I think it was a 2-year deal with San Jose coming out of free agency, and I've never tested the free agent waters, and I took a little bit less money and stuff, and so I was hoping to continue to play there, but obviously when they had the opportunity to pick up Joe, I mean, it's a trade that they had to make, so just unfortunate that I had to be a part of it, but I also enjoyed my time in Boston too. It's a great city, and I think it worked for both. I think that San Jose got a great player and a future Hall of Famer, but at the same time, Boston they were making changes, and finally in the end, I mean, they ended up winning a Stanley Cup and making it to the Stanley Cup Finals again and losing. So they've done pretty well with how the trades worked out.
And Wayne, around a year ago, your brother Keith was on the program, and he was talking about the Stop Concussions Foundation, and his history of concussions and how he left the game has been very well documented. But how was your health when you were retiring after 14 years in the league, and did you have any long-term ramifications from any injuries?
No, I mean, near the end of my career, when I was in Calgary, actually, the one year I broke my ankle and had a high ankle sprain, and then the following season I ended up breaking my other ankle from a Dion Phaneuf slap shot in practice. So it was, the injuries started to build up, but obviously, I didn't have to retire due to any long-term injuries or anything like that, like Keith did, but. I was, does the body ache at times? For sure, but not to the point where, I left the game rather healthy.
So tell us about the Durham Hockey Institute that I know that both you and Keith are very involved with.
Yeah, so we run camps and clinics, and then also do spring hockey teams called DHI Octane Elite. And we run hockey tournaments. We started with a tournament called Top Tier Toronto in Toronto, and then we actually joined forces with a Yogi Sachkovsky, who's a assistant coach with the Vancouver Giants. He runs a hockey program out west called BC Bears, and he had reached out to us if we would help him build a tournament out there. So we created a tournament called Top Tier West. And then we started to do showcases throughout North America at university campuses and stuff where, teams, I do it with I coach my oldest boys team and take my kids, they've taken them to Ann Arbor, where they played at Yost and Munn Arena, home of Michigan Wolverines and Michigan State Spartans. I've taken them to Miami of Ohio. I've went to Notre Dame, to South Bend for that school, and then next year we're going to go to Penn State. So we eventually started to become a little bit bigger. So we actually merged forces with a U.S.-based company called Super Series AAA, and it's been going real well, and trying to just give back to hockey, and it's a real joy coaching the kids and seeing them develop, and seeing ultimately, hopefully, they get the opportunity to live out their dream.
Well, and you talk about wanting to give back, and you were obviously very involved in competitive hockey whenever you were a kid, but what surprised you the most when you were transitioning back into the AAA minor hockey system compared to whenever you would have been experiencing it as a player around 20 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think my dad did a pretty good job, or my parents did a pretty good job of keeping all the politics, on the back burner, not allowing us to kind of see all the other stuff that goes on. But you really do realize that The best thing about the game of hockey is the tradition and having the kids active and being out there and for me growing up, my best friends were always the kids that I played minor hockey with. And here growing up in Toronto, it's a little bit more different because you have kids that live in all different areas of Toronto, or you have also imports that are coming in from whether it's Ajax or Pickering or Whitby or Brampton or wherever it might be, Oakville. So they don't get to maybe spend as much time with their teammates away from the rinks. And then there's also a lot of, like I said, a lot of politics that are involved with what goes on and stuff. And it should just be about the kids and learning and having fun and getting that competitive edge.
This is Life After the Game, brought to you by Gong Show Gear. I'm Darcy Lynch. This week my guest is Wayne Primeau. Wayne, you make reference to Toronto being where you grew up and where you're currently residing, and that's where you finished up your NHL career with the Leafs. But you'd also, as you referenced earlier, had a stop in Calgary before that. And given that the bulk of your career had all been played in the States before those two stops, right, which did you really find that was more suited to you? Did you like the attention that comes with fishbowl markets? Well, Calgary is one example, but there's nothing compares to Toronto in that aspect. Or was it a far contrast from what you were used to whenever you were playing in markets like, say, San Jose or Tampa?
Yeah, I mean, San Jose was a great place to play, and then probably one of the reasons is that you have your direct media, you have, a couple of newspaper guys, you have, a couple of TV guys and maybe a couple of radio guys. Whereas when you come to Toronto or Calgary, I mean, you got number of each. And so when you're after practices or whatever in the dressing room, I mean, it's just full with reporters. Whereas in San Jose, you have maybe 3, 4 reporters that are in there, unless there's an opposing team coming in from, like Toronto or Montreal, where you get, more media that's in the room. But yeah, definitely, it's when you leave the rink, it's left behind. Whereas when you're in, Toronto or Calgary and you leave the rink, you're still hearing about it. So, but they're both. There's positive and negatives to both, and it's great either way.
Growing up in the Toronto area and then playing for the Leafs, and is there any extra pressure associated with that, do you find, or because that was so far along into your career that you were an established veteran at that point, did you not necessarily did you find that might have been different than, say, if you had started in Toronto whenever you were breaking into the league? Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think 100% that if it would have been different if I would have started with Toronto. This was right at the end of my career, and so I really didn't. I really didn't. I just tried to enjoy it. Tried to enjoy being a Toronto Maple Leaf, getting the chance to wear the blue and white, watching it, playing for the team that I grew up watching as a child, and I never really listened to the sports stations or anything like that. Just went to the rink and went about my own business, and like I said, just tried to enjoy it as much as possible.
And one last one for you, Wayne, before we sign off. As I mentioned, Gong Show Gear, the leader in hockey lifestyle apparel, is the sponsor of this show. And the word Gong Show itself could easily be used to describe one fight that stands out from earlier in your career. And I imagine you probably know where I'm going to go with this one. That whenever your brother Keith was on last year, we were talking about the legendary fight that the two of you had very early in your career whenever you were with the Sabres and he was with the Hartford Whalers. And Keith did talk about how he said that the stories around that never seem to die, especially now with social media, that there's always people referring to the two of you fighting. And I'm sure your feelings are the same, as Keith talked about it. Basically, at the time, was just another NHL fight. But he also did say that your mother and your sister were the most upset with the two of you. But what's your memories of the lead up to that fight, and just what was going through your mind whenever you're squaring off? Was it strictly just like it was another player? It was any member of Hartford, or instinctively are you also thinking at the same time, hey, this is Keith?
Yeah, well, I don't think my mom and my sister were upset with the two of us. I think they were more upset with him because he's the older sibling, right? So, but yeah, no, it was one of those things where we were in Hartford, and I was with Buffalo, and Keith was with Hartford, and he's a fan favorite there, and I remember getting hit in the corner from one of his defensemen, Alexander Godiniak, and I didn't like how he hit me, so I went back at him in front of their net and kind of knocked him over, and I had my stick underneath him, and I was kind of pulling it away and jabbing at him, and then Sean Burke was his goalie, I was in his crease, so he came out and he punched me in the head, and I punched him in the head, and he punched me, and I went to swing, and next thing you know, I had someone on my back, and it was Keith, and kind of got over into the corner, away from everything. But Bob Bugner was on my team. He came over, and he's saying, "You guys aren't going to fight. You guys are brothers. Don't fight. Your brothers," or whatever. And so they're chanting Primeau, Primeau, Primeau. And next thing you know, we kind of got away from the scrum, and he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I don't care." And so sure enough, we started throwing punches, and I could tell he was kind of holding back. He wasn't going through his punches, but he was still hitting me in the head, so I wasn't really happy with how it was going. So I went and threw an uppercut and kind of just skimmed his helmet, and you can see where his helmet kind of goes up, and that's where I think he's thinking to himself, this is getting a little bit too serious, and he kind of threw me to the ground and stuff. And so it was near the end of the second period, and I went to my dressing room, he went to his, and he went right to the trainer's room and picked up the phone and called my parents, and my dad answered. He's kind of laughing and chuckling and stuff, and Keith's like, apologizing, saying, it shouldn't have happened or whatever, and my dad's still laughing. And next thing you know, my one sister and my mom started yelling, "No, yeah, it shouldn't have happened. You're the older sibling. It was the wrong thing to do." And so as soon as they said that, then my dad stopped laughing, and he understood. He said, he knows we're competitive and everything else, but just had told us to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Wayne, thanks a lot for coming on the show. It was great doing a little walkthrough of your NHL career, but also hearing what's keeping you busy these days. And I encourage listeners to check out the DurhamHockeyInstitute.com. Thanks again, Wayne, and we'll hopefully touch base again down the road.
Thanks, Darcy.
You've been listening to Life After the Game, brought to you by Gong Show Gear, the premier manufacturer of lifestyle hockey apparel. Check them out at gongshowgear.com. Thanks to this week's guest, Wayne Primeau. I'm Darcy Lynch. You can follow the show on Twitter at Darcy P. Lynch.
Top shelf classic lager, brewed using only the finest noble hops and Canadian malt. This crisp and refreshing lager aims high and scores big. From Lake Bay's Brewing Company in partnership with the NHL Alumni Association. Available at the LCBO and the beer store.